All right, all right, all right. Hey, Colin, what do the Ramones say?
Hey ho, let's go!
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for another episode of Legends and Losers.
How'd you like that?
That
Coming
was
in stereo on you.
stereo. Yeah. And we want to encourage you to be podcast legends. About 80% of Americans last month did not enjoy a podcast. And so we ask you to tell two people you love about two podcasts you love, and then grab their Samsung or their iPhone or whatever it is they want to use, and show them how to get it all set up. Do you think that'd be a nice thing to do, Colin?
It'd be such a nice thing to do.
Yeah. All right. We have a great show for you today. Tell them who our guest is today.
Our guest today is Kevin Maney.
Yeah, and Kevin is one of my absolute favorite people in the world. I've known Kevin for a very long time, and I've gotten to know him very well over the last half decade or so, because he and I were lucky enough to work together with two other really smart guys in writing a book called Play Bigger. And so
that's part of my lines actually, but that's okay.
Well, I just,
stealing my lines every
okay,
time.
well, you'll tell them all about Kevin's amazing background, but suffice it to say, he's one of my favorite people in the world.
And he's a very steezy dude.
He's a very handsome guy, and he dresses
impeccably.
Right? He always looks
awesome.
We could do like an improv like this.
His hair is awesome too. He's got very, very steezy hair.
Yeah, most men over the age of 30
can't do what he
have
does.
Stupid hair.
Yeah, no,
pretty much, and he's got very cool hair.
Very cool hair.
Yeah, and what can I say? Ladies love Kevin. But hey, before we get to Kevin,
LLKJ,
yeah, LLK May, K May,
LLKM,
yeah. So hey, did you know that you can make whiskey from old bagels?
What about quiche? Because if we can make whiskey out of bagels and quiche, we are in business tonight. Because we have lots of bagels and quiche. I've been informed.
And do you want to tell people why we're laughing about this?
Yeah, because this afternoon Christopher says to me, "Well, I don't know what you're thinking about dinner tonight, but we got lots of bagels and quiche." I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard.
Well, see, I've been made a bachelor here for the last few days, and we're sort of down to bagels and quiche.
Yeah, but fortunately we have whiskey, so we don't have to use our bagels and quiche to make whiskey.
Oh, for the love of God. Okay, so here's the story. This is on the dailybeast.com. America, jeez Louise. America is becoming the Wild West of whiskey, with distillers ginning up ever more creative spirits that defy categorization. Translation: category design in whiskey. All right, so the story goes on to introduce a gal named Amy. I'm going to say this name is Bonner. I'm going to say it that way.
That's exactly how you should say it.
And then she has a bunch of bagels in her freezer, and it goes on. But essentially,
is this an Onion article?
No, it's a Daily Beast article. She has this idea. First of all, guess where this is taking place?
Omaha, Nebraska?
No.
I don't know.
Humboldt County in Northern California.
Oh, that was my second guess.
So apparently there are a number of vodka companies that have rolled out donut-flavored spirits.
Ooh.
And Bonner's plain multi-grain sesame seed and poppy seed bagels will be used to make the actual alcohol. And so she said she was inspired by a British brewery called Toast Ale, which uses leftover bread to make beer. So anyway, she approaches a local bagel company. She gets its stale bagels, and once a week, she collects 60 pounds of bagels, freezes them until they're enough for a run. Then she gets the bagels going. I don't know what she puts them in a commercial grade wood chopper.
A wood chipper?
Wood chipper, yeah. Wood chipper.
Chipping your friend, eh?
and
Putting
then
your friend in the wood chipper?
yeah, like and then I
Wait,
guess
well, she puts bagels in a wood chipper.
yeah, she puts the frozen bagels and then they're ground up in a wood chipper, then fermented and distilled like corn. And so we'll be able to buy this whiskey. The first batch is currently aging in a charred, new American oak barrel, and she's hoping to release the first bottles by Hanukkah. With any luck, the Bolt Los Bagels whiskey will become part of the distillery's permanent portfolio.
Going.
Yeah, going. Bagels from whiskey. Or whiskey from bagels, as the case may be. All right. Why don't you tell our legendary friends about my dear friend, Kevin Maney?
Okay. So Kevin Maney is a best-selling author and award-winning columnist. He has been writing about technology for 30 years, has interviewed most of the tech pioneers you can name. He's appeared frequently on television and radio, including CNN, CBS Sunday Morning, and NPR, and lectures at conferences and universities. Kevin co-authored, see, this is the part that you were trying to steal from me. Kevin co-authored with Al Ramadan, Dave Peterson, and Christopher Lochhead the bestseller Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets, published by HarperCollins Business. Maney's other books include The 2-Second Advantage, a 2011 New York Times bestseller. He also co-wrote the most widely distributed business book of 2011, Making the World Work Better. Trade-Off, Why Some Things Catch On and Others Don't. The IBM Classic, The Maverick and His Machine. And finally, Mega Media Shakeout. Kevin is also a partner at Category Design Agency, where he advises executives teams on how to design and dominate their market niche. Kevin is a husband and a dad. Now, our dialogue with the legendary Kevin Maney.
Well, you asked. I'll leap right into the loser story.
We love loser stories.
Because, well, I was because prompted by coming on here, I was thinking about my kids will tell you that they get sick of me talking about the old Eastern philosophy phrase, "You never know what's good or bad," because I tell them that all the time. And I mean, whatever's happening to you in the moment, you really never know whether that thing is good or bad, even if it seems like the worst thing that ever happened.
So you think that even if you're convinced in the moment that there's no way that this, whatever this is, could
Absolutely.
be good, that it might actually be good, even though you think it's bad?
Absolutely. Well, so there's this old. I read it first in this amazing little book called The Geography of Thought.
The Geography of Thought.
The Geography of Thought, and I think it's in the opening of the book. This professor who studied both. He's comparing Eastern thinking to Western thinking, and sorry, this is a little bit of a diversion, but still, and he goes into this whole.
Every discussion with me is a little bit of a diversion.
That's true.
This is diversion central. You never know when zebras are going to go by, or squirrels are going to juggle chainsaws, or
chickens. Where are the chickens?
Chickens and naked ladies and all sorts of things distract us around here.
So he launches into this. There's this whole sort of Eastern philosophy legend that like this man and his family are out on their farm in China somewhere, and and his son falls off a horse and breaks his leg, and the father thinks, oh, this is like the worst thing that ever happened. We can't get our crops in. Our family is going to be ruined. And then the next thing that happens a couple days later is the Chinese army kind of comes through looking for conscripts, and they're taking all the young men to go fight in this next battle. And his son's got a broken leg, so they leave him behind. So he's like, oh, this is the best thing that ever happened. It kind of goes on and on, like it continues to wind and wind and wind like that. But that's basically the idea, is that this thing that happened, and conversely, the thing that in the moment you think is the best thing that ever happened to you sometimes turns out to be terrible. You just never know.
It's funny, in a conversation we had recently with the legendary Heather Clancy, now of Fortune and green business fame. She said when she got fired from her, I think she'd been there for the better part of 20 years at CRN, that turned out to be the greatest thing that happened in her career.
Yep.
Right. And how often do you hear somebody say that?
Yep, exactly.
It's an interesting insight. So you try to, in the moment where something terrible is going on, you try to hold on to, hey, wait a minute, maybe this isn't as terrible as I think it might be right now.
Yeah, I try. It's not always easy, and it also tempers the temptation when something goes right to say like, oh, my life is just like now everything's just right, everything's gonna be the best it ever was. So one of the ways that played out for me was as a writer. I mean, one of the things that's part of being a writer is rejection, especially earlier in your career, constantly. And,
hey, Kev, can you just be careful? I think what's going on is your mic is scratching your sweater.
Oh yeah, okay. I'll pull it away a little bit.
So have you trained yourself to love rejection? Is that what you're saying?
No, absolutely not. You can never love rejection. But I, way back when this would be like the early 90s, and I was working at USA Today. I was covering technology for USA Today. And, at the time writing about most of the usual stuff, personal computers and, IBM and things like that. And I remember reading a couple of things, a couple of the earliest ideas that, there was going to be this thing called interactive television, which some of the cable companies were starting to work on. And B, this idea that content was beginning to be digitized. And I don't know why. I understood it really early on, like how huge this was going to be.
It's because you're fucking smart. That's why you understood it. You're way immodest, Kevin. The size of your brain is so large. I'm surprised they don't make you wear some kind of a neck brace or something.
Exactly. Well, I'll take that, but still. So I started aggressively covering, like I really think I was one of the earlier reporters to aggressively start covering this idea that media was going digital and what that was going to mean. And interactive television, there was a whole thing about 500 channels of television and Al Gore with his information superhighway. And I knew there was a book in there. Now I had never written a book before. I just a reporter, and I put together a book proposal about this idea, and sent it to like every publisher known to man. And every publisher known to man said, basically, screw you. It's this,
hey, Kev, you suck.
You suck.
You're a loser.
Or you. And so like I thought, I threw this thing in a drawer and thought, well, okay, maybe this is not going to ever happen for me. I'm not going to be a book author, even though I have to tell you that one of the goals in my mind from the time I was like in college was one of these, someday I'm going to write a book. Probably 6 months go by, and I continue writing about this stuff for USA Today.
I'm still getting a little of your scratchy. Sorry.
Okay, I'm doing my best. I'm trying.
You're getting too excited.
I'll try not to move. And I out of the blue, I get a call from this editor. His name is John Mahaney, and he was at Wiley Books at the time. And Mahaney said, I was just reading a couple of the most recent stories you did in USA Today about, some of this digital media information superhighway stuff. And he said, literally, these are the words out of his mouth that he said, I don't know, but I was thinking that there might be a book in that. And he was kind of asking me if I knew of somebody or like who would be a good idea to write a book like that. And my answer to him was, I said, well, I have something in a drawer that I can send you. And there was this, because of the series of rejections, I actually had this book proposal sitting in a drawer that I literally sent him the next day, and he signed me to a book deal. It was my first book called Mega Media Shakeout. And there's a
how many rejections had you had at that point, roughly?
Oh, I mean, there probably had been 30 rejections to that book idea.
Yeah.
By that point. And I had given up. I had basically thought, this is just not in my near future anyway. There's a more recent twist to that whole story. So I worked with John. That was my first book, John Maney. Came out in 1995, just as the whole internet thing blew up.
You were what, about 12 at the time?
I was 12, and no wonder the publishers rejected my manuscript, the idea. And all these years later, the book that I'm working on now, I'm co-authoring collaborating on a book with Hemant Taneja from General Catalyst. And the editor.
Can you tell us much about it, or is it top secret?
I could tell you. We'll get there later. I could tell you a little about. But what I'm coming back to is that 20 years later, John Mahaney, the same guy, is the one who bought this book and who I'm working with again.
And have you worked with John subsequent to that, or has there been a 20-year gap?
21-year gap.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
And I bet you're stoked to be working with him again.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's fun to. Yeah, he was a great editor the first time. He's proving to be this time too.
And so it takes a lot of losing to be a legend. Is that what you're saying?
I actually think that it's true. I actually think that is a true statement.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? And I love what you said off the top. Because you're right. When you get that 47th rejection letter, it's hard to believe that's good news.
Yeah, right. How
do you, Kevin, especially because of what you do, it's a creative thing and it's a personal thing, right? And so when they reject your work, it's got to feel like they're rejecting you. So how do you not take that personally, particularly in the beginning of your career?
Well, I found that really hard in the beginning of my career.
Yeah, because you're more an introverted guy, and I, of course, know you very well, and you're a deep feeling kind of a guy, and so when those rejections come in, it can't feel good.
No, yeah, no. Well, and again, when you're young and full of spunk and everything else too, and you absolutely believe in what you're doing, and you do. It's hard not to take it personally. It's really hard not to take it personally, and I did. I got pretty bummed out about some of those. Those early days, and I've had a lot of writing ambitions. I wrote an entire novel that I sent to media publishers and never got published, and that still sits in a drawer somewhere. When
are we going to see the Kevin Maney novel come out?
Well, so here's another interesting. I've never been shy about seeking advice from people, which is also, something else that anybody who's a young person who's looking at a career, I can't emphasize that enough. I had written this entire novel that I had high hopes for, and soon realized it was not going to get published. I guess I'm a better nonfiction writer than I am a fiction writer, and I had just read a book by this guy named James Finney Boylan, who was a professor English professor at a college up in Maine, Colby College up in Maine. And something about the book struck me as this is the kind of book I would want to write and I would want to publish. It was called The Planets. And so on a whim, I looked him up. I mean, this was before the internet. I had all, could do all this stuff or even email. And I wrote him a letter. And I told him about trying to write this book and how much I liked his and if he had any ideas for me or anything. And he was very nice and he wrote back to me. And the one I have no idea, I can't remember any other part of the letter except for this one part, which he basically said, every novelist has to write 2.5 books worth of shit before you can write the one good book. So if you've written one novel, you still have 1.5 novels worth of shit to write.
Call me when you're on the third one, and maybe it won't be a piece of shit.
That's right. Now I could also fast forward the James Finney Boylan story. James Boylan, maybe 10 years after that, went through a sex change operation, became Jennifer Boylan, and Jennifer Boylan is now reasonably famous because Jennifer Boylan was on with Caitlyn Jenner on her reality
Oh,
show.
wow.
And
Is there there's a Caitlyn Jenner reality? Oh, of course there is.
There was, yeah. And she has now written several books about, being
Jennifer.
She Jennifer. Yeah. So it's all sorts of full circle things happen. It's fun in life.
It's funny because when I was, as you well know, I had real jobs for about 20 years, and then I was a coach for about 10 years. And when I was coaching entrepreneurs as a full-time job, of course, I talked to a lot of really young entrepreneurs, and there were definitely moments where I said to young entrepreneurs, email me when you do your next one. Because right now you can't hear a fucking thing I say. And I get it, because it feels like it was about 20 minutes ago that, I was a 26-year-old guy, and I'm sure my hearing was pretty retarded at the time. So, yeah, get a little bit humbled, get a few shots to the nuts, and come back when you flexed your muscle a little bit and you're a little humble and you're ready to do something. Right? Is it kind of like that?
True. It's really true. It is true.
Yeah.
And you hate to admit it in the moment. You always want to think that you've got everything by the hand, and you know what you're doing, but
what was the first book that you wrote that was a hit, and you realized, holy shit, I actually wrote a hit book?
Well, I had the problem of the kinds of the rock stars that have a hit with the first thing that that comes out of their mouth, and then they can't repeat it. Because books like music, like any form of art, it's not always about the actual content. It's about the zeitgeist of the time, and what a bit of luck and all sorts of things happen. And I wrote that first book was about, it happened to be the first book that really came out about digital media.
Yep.
And it landed in 1995, just as all this, at Netscape and everything else exploded. And all of a sudden, without any experience whatsoever doing any of this kind of stuff, I got asked to speak at conferences in front of 5,000 people. I got asked by companies to come in and talk to their boards of directors. I look back, if I could see a video of any of those things right now, I would be so embarrassed at what I was like. And so this book took off. I mean, it sold well. It made me a boatload of money from speeches and advisory kinds of things and stuff. But it was all partly because of the content, but also partly because of just the time and what happened.
I'd rather be lucky than smart, right?
Well, yeah, a little of both is helpful, actually.
Yeah, well, you had both going for you. I think I've mostly had luck, but I've written this is like, I guess I'm writing my 8th book now. This is 8. So Play Bigger, was Play Bigger 7th or 6th?
Play Bigger was 7th. There was one in there, a story that I've shared with you before about writing this book about the Indian mogul that never got published.
Yeah.
I've had lots of books that have done reasonably well. Lots of books have gotten great critical praise, but nothing that was sort of the same hit as that first one that came out of the box.
Well, hey, you don't think Play Bigger's a hit? I mean, come on.
Well, it's a different kind of hit. The thing that is so satisfying about Play Bigger is that it's having an impact on the conversation.
Yeah.
In a way that I don't think anything else that I've done has had. We've changed the way and for those of you listening, Chris and I wrote this book together with a couple of other guys, and
we don't have to talk about them.
And as you know, I mean, like there's venture capital firms that have changed the way that they think about investing based on.
I had a conversation with the VC 2 weeks ago that blew my mind, because what he shared with me was he will not meet with an entrepreneur who hasn't read Play Bigger.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's amazing.
I was like, holy shit. And he's like, yeah, because they need to come in understanding the new game and how this works. And if they don't know that, then it's kind of a waste of my time. And so like I tell them, you need to read this book or don't come in and meet with me. I was like, and this was like a non-trivial VC. And so, and I don't know about you, but I mean, I get hit almost daily now, Kev, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever, email directly, whatever it is, from somebody somewhere in the world. And, sometimes it's, people in Norway or, wherever, and they say these incredible things. And so that's been, I mean, I've never obviously written a book before. I had no idea sort of the reverberations that could come.
Well, yes. I mean, it certainly there are reverberations when you hit a chord, and this one did. But so I thought one thing I could do here is tell a little bit of the story behind that from my perspective.
I would love to, because I can only imagine it looked insane from your perspective.
Well, and there's a little of the what's good or never know what's good or bad in this too, because right around as Chris and Dave Peterson and Al Ramadan you guys were all running this advisory firm, coaching firm called Play Bigger. And Al I had known the best, going back to his Quokka days back in the 90s. You I had met along the way a couple of times. We didn't really know each other. Dave I didn't know at all. And I had just come off of a couple of disasters. I had this book that I worked to.
You mean even a legend like you at that incredible stage of your career, you could still have some, as we now affectionately call it, losery going on?
And I'm sure there's more to come.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. Like, oh, I thought I was done failing. Fuck.
Well, I'm sure you can appreciate this, Chris. Basically, right? I mean, if you're not failing, if you're not risking failure, you're not trying.
It's one of the things I love about surfing, because just when you think your surf mojo is really good and it's all working really well, like you take off on this great set wave and you, for whatever reason, blow the takeoff and get smashed and held underwater and drown and ragdolled with your board, and maybe your fins try to bite you in the you think, fucking A, man, I thought I knew how to surf. It's at that moment where you think you got it all going. So yeah,
always
the continues.
I'd worked on this book for 2.5 years in India, and had it essentially, killed through legal matters that were involved in the book. And that was a pretty devastating blow. It was literally ready to be published. So that was going.
And now I understand what that means. If you'd shared that with me before, I wouldn't, of course, had the content.
Appreciation.
I mean, you really do put your heart and soul into a book. And, Play Bigger took us plus or minus 2 years. So, I mean, I can't imagine, of course you're doing your Newsweek thing and you're speaking and your other, celebrity Kevin Maney things, but 2.5 years putting your heart and soul into a book. And I know, the research and everything. I mean, what does that feel like when you're on the 1 yard line and it gets canned?
Well, I had never experienced anything like that before. And it's, that was a really devastating blow, because I felt like the book itself was some of the best work that I'd done. It told a story about the technology industry in India that was personal and human, and unlike anything that really, I guarantee you to this day, anybody's ever read. And I thought it'd be, enlightening to the world if that had come out. So it really was devastating.
So you were bouncing back off of that. Very painful, because the books are like we talked about, it's personal and it's intimate and it's you. It's not some theoretical thing, right?
Right. And it was somewhere around that time that Dave and Al, you were, I think, out of town, or you're tied up with something. And Dave
I was probably drinking scotch or chasing Carrie around the house or something.
which probably would have been more fun than having dinner with David Al. But no, no, we love those guys. And so we had a dinner, and they started talking about the kind of philosophy that you guys were working with Play Bigger, and the idea of category kings and lightning strikes and some of that stuff. And I'm listening, and having this. And I do know that as a journalist who always has my ear to the ground and trying to know what's how things are moving and stuff, that the ideas behind category kings especially struck me as, oh, there's something there that actually sounds really right, and there's probably something interesting to explore here. That I knew. The part that I didn't know is whether you guys are serious.
So how did you decide to figure out, what were you? How could you figure out if these nut jobs were serious? Because we must have seemed pretty nuts, right?
Well, not so much nuts as I knew you didn't know yet what it took to put it together to get to
Right.
do a book, and the amount of commitment that it takes, and as you now know very well, and so, I mean, my reaction to those kinds of things is that I just need to let it play out. And I did my best to we had a chance to meet with you and make sure you laid out what it was really going to take, and what, and so you really kind of knew it as best you could. And just kind of let you guys simmer with it and see if it was actually going to be something you followed through with. I have to say, I actually ended up being pleasantly surprised when you really did want to go through with it. And I think
you didn't think we were going to do it because
no, I actually didn't.
Was too big.
I actually didn't. I was not, from starting with that first meeting, I was not putting it in my pocket and saying, all right, this is going to happen. This is a done deal. And I think it took 6 months before it got all played out.
Yeah. I know I can't speak for the other guys, but it took a lot of convincing for me to believe that we had something that was that unique, that was worthy of contributing to the world. I personally had no interest in some bullshit book that was just a reswizzle of other stuff and, some Kardashian book stunt, whatever. I could give a shit, right? So it took a lot for me to actually believe that we had something that was valuable. And, you actually, I think, were a big part of the X factor in that, Kevin. You saying, hey, wait a minute. I'll never forget when you said to us, category design is a new lens, and the world needs to have that lens. Or I don't know if you remember that you said that, but it was something like that. And I was like, well, if this guy thinks that, then we really do. And of course, Peggy was on us and a handful of other wonderful people. And so, but it was, I can't remember. I think we might've been up at the city at the Mark Hopkins having lunch or something, but it was somewhere around there. You said, no, this is a whole new lens on business, and we should give that lens to the world.
Yeah, no, well, and I believe in that kind of perspective shifting. Well, to me, I was telling you the story about about digital media back in the 90s. To me, that was a lens. All of a sudden, once I saw that, once I had that in my head, oh, this is where the whole world is going, then everything I looked at was colored by that. Every time I saw what a big company like AT&T or something was doing, that lens informed me in a different way about what was going to happen to that company, or how that strategy was going to play out. And I've seen that throughout my career. I will never say I'm not the one who invents these lenses. I just think I'm pretty good at spotting them when they come across my path. And
no question.
And that's what I felt like. I felt like after, this happened several times in my career, and I felt like when you described what you were talking about, that's the way I felt. Was all of a sudden I'm looking at the world differently because I have this set of glasses on, and it helps me understand why this company is going to work and why this idea is kind of dumb, and and that's super valuable. And that's what when I when I felt like that's what you had,
Yeah.
that's what I felt like. Okay, there is a book here, and what it needs is it needs you know, to be perfecting. It needs to like be filled out and backed up with real research, and then there's something here.
And Kev, would you say, is that really the secret to your success, that you're always looking for these lenses? That is to say, a new perspective on something that blows open something, if I can say it that way?
I think that I think that's probably right. And so
So is it the heart of that curiosity, or what leads you to want to? Because, you know, a lot of us get pretty committed to our own worldview. And when we hear things that challenge that or are different from that, we view it as foreign, right? Or stupid, or we're not interested in it. And so what is it that drives you to be looking for a new way of looking at things, this new lens, so to speak?
Well, here's a little a little story. So Jimmy Breslin just died, and I don't know if people outside of New York know Jimmy. So Jimmy Breslin is
You'll have to excuse me.
Jimmy Breslin is like one of the all-time legendary New York columnists. He's like one of these guys who wrote about the guys in the bar, and he was worked for the Daily News for years. He was just absolutely legendary. Funny, urban, I mean, not urban, the opposite of that, more, kind of a misanthrope, that kind of.
So a little bit of a Tom Waitsy, Hunter S. Thompson-y.
Exactly. Right. So Jimmy Breslin just died like this past week.
And who did he write for mostly, or was he?
The Daily News most of his life. But
Okay.
He bounced around in the New York newspapers.
Yeah.
In the heyday of columnists, right?
Back when columnists were columnists.
Columnists. And a friend of mine who also used to work in the New York media was telling a story about running into him one time. And I thought this described what he did and what great columnists, or what I feel like I try to do. And he talks about, he went to a scene of a multiple murder that my friend did, and he was a young reporter who was covering it, and like 12 other reporters, they were all standing at the murder scene. The cops were all around trying to get the details, and they were all going to write the same story the next day. So he said Jimmy Breslin shows up, and he walks over and he asks my friend, who at the time was probably like 23, what's going on here? And my friend told him a couple of details. He said, all right. And all of a sudden he sees Breslin leave, and he's thinking like, well, he's not going to get the story. He's leaving the scene, And he said he picks up the paper the next day, and Breslin had written this beautifully done column where he had gone gone to the neighborhood where he figured out where the neighborhood where these kids that just got killed grew up, and wrote about their lives before this happened, and how they got to be in that place where they got killed. And so he just looked for that other perspective on what was happening. Now that's a pretty simple way of looking at it, but that kind of writer who I've always wanted to be, and literally, I mean, this is part of my how Kevin Maney became Kevin Maney. From the earliest days, from the time I was in college, I admired those kinds of columnists. There were people like Mike Royko, the name's gonna Russell Baker. I couldn't think of his name. Breslin. These were people who I admired and wanted to be like, and they taught me to do that. They taught me to reading their stuff. Taught me to not look where everybody else is looking, but try to look somewhere else. And I'll give you, for instance, like that's immediate now.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, because of the reporting and work that I do, I have a bunch of stuff in my head about what artificial intelligence and genomics, and some of what the startups are doing in some of those spaces, and what's going to be possible. And I see everything that's being talked about today through that kind of lens. Now I'm watching these guys on TV in Congress debating Obamacare, the healthcare issue. And I don't care what side of the spectrum you come down on, or what you feel like Obamacare should be. I look at what they're saying and I say, they're having the wrong argument. that if those congressmen only knew what the way technology is going to change healthcare over the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, as
They're having the
dramatically,
wrong conversation.
right, as dramatically as going back to the time when vaccines were first discovered, or we first figured out that germs actually cause infections.
So you think we're on the precipice of those kinds of discoveries, or
Of
whether
those
it's
kinds of
genomics
discoveries,
or
that
big data or AI, and all those things come
all those things
together?
are coming together, and there are so many ways that that these technologies are actually going to drive down the cost of healthcare while making it better. In the same way that technology is done for everything. You have a laptop in front of you. I mean, that technology has done that to computers for 50 years.
Yeah.
It has not had that effect on healthcare, but it's about to. And so how does that change the debate when you look out 10 years and you say, well, actually, Moore's law might start to finally have the same kind of effect on healthcare that's had on everything else. It's a different.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. We had a dialogue with Mike Maples not that long ago, and he thinks that the combination of Moore's law and Metcalfe's law sort of come together are actually changing the way we need to think about the economy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right. He says the sort of notion of modern economic theory, and I'm not an economist, but is predicated on a scarcity, right? There's only so many bananas in the world, and there's supply and demand of bananas, and those things play out. And so essentially you're in business, you're fighting for scarcity, a disproportionate share of some scarce thing. And, Maples, who you know well, says in this world where Moore's law and Metcalfe's law are playing out the way they are, they actually create an abundance. And so the job today is, how do I capture share in something that's increasing both demand and supply, as opposed to something that's got a scarcity mentality to it.
Yeah.
And so if I connect those two things, Kev, do you think there's like an increasing amount of abundance around that's getting created around how we solve medical problems that is being driven by Moore's and Metcalfe's law? Could I take it that far?
No, absolutely. That's exactly right. And so here's one example is you look at what IBM is doing with Watson in healthcare. And so Watson is this AI driven machine. It now runs on big ass computers in a data center. Watson can ingest millions and millions of pages of medical research. It can ingest millions and millions of personal data records, anonymized, but to look for trends and all the stuff. And it can even watch the news and understand that that there's certain regions of the world now that have the Zika virus, for instance, things like that.
Can it find my fucking keys?
Well, that might be too hard a problem, Chris. I'm not sure. But right now IBM is working and regulations are because prevent certain things from happening. But right now IBM is working with places like Cleveland Clinic and to put Watson in the hands of doctors that can use it as an assistant to help diagnose. But the reality is this thing, as it learns more and more about the world and about healthcare situations, this thing is going to become the best diagnostician in the world. It's going to be able to diagnose situations by asking people questions better than any doctor living.
And is it just to try to unpack that for a sec? If you sort of think, I map my genome here, so you know my genomics. There's big data, there's artificial intelligence, there's machine learning here, and as it acquires knowledge, I can look at, on one hand, all the knowledge in this mass intelligence database that's happening, and I can compare that to your genome, and I can begin to, using, if you will, intelligence, forecasting intelligence, tell you, hey, you have an X% chance of testicular cancer, or an X% chance of hearing loss, or whatever it is. Is that where you see us?
Well, so there's all of that, but add in the natural language processing abilities. I mean, if any of your watchers have an Amazon Echo, you know that you can start to talk to these things pretty easily. And so now let's imagine that IBM starts to be able to put Watson in your Amazon Echo, and and you've got you're feeling well, and you go over to your thing and just start talking to it like you talk to a doctor, and it starts asking you questions in just, the English language. So now it has all that information about you. It has so much information about your health that no doctor would ever be able to have. Plus, starts to narrow down things by asking you the right questions. And there's absolutely no question that could be a better way to at least get a first diagnosis of what's going on, or at least be able to tell you, oh, that's nothing to worry about, or just take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning, or Jesus, get yourself to an emergency room right now. All those possibilities are there. But if that's true, and if the regulations evolve to allow that AI doctor to actually be your essential, your personal physician, or your first pass on anything like that. So now we're talking about taking what doctors do and putting it in software, which is where you get the abundance, right? Because now it can scale infinitely. Now there's no wait in the waiting room at the doctor's office, because what makes healthcare so expensive is that there's much more demand than there is supply. So now suddenly you've completely solved one aspect of the supply problem.
Right. And so you imagine a world in which we say, Alexa, what's this thing growing on my arm?
Right. And Alexa says, take a picture of it and send it to me. All right. There's, now I see what this looks like. Do you have a fever? No. Well, it starts going down that path.
Is your butt sore?
That's another problem. That's a different origin. So,
How far away do you, I know you spend a lot of time on topics like this. How far away do you think we are from the scenario you just described?
From being able to do it really well, 5 years. From being able to offer it to the public as a something is a real service, that's going to depend some on how regulators handle it, because right now there are restrictions on being able to.
And do you think it's going to be like a lot of things where, with all due respect to our regulators' ability to, I think about your comment about this topic as soon as we started here, keep up with what's going on is de minimis. And so they're really dealing with regulations through a rear view mirror, as opposed to imagining the possible based on what we know is currently happening.
Yeah, that is the problem. And of course, they're subject to, to pressures from industry and lobbyists who want to keep things the way they are. And so, it'll be
but, to your point on new lenses, right? And we say it in our book, once the world sees the problem in a new and different way, they can't unsee it. And so they demand the solution, right?
That's right.
Sort of, if you think about the ultimate version of that, the Arab Spring, right? It's like, well, once the world sees what's possible and they can use technology and so forth and so on, it's very hard to get the genie back in the bottle, regardless of what regulators may or may not want.
Yeah, no, that's right. And so eventually I'm sure there will be pressure from, the pressure is going to come from employers, from companies who spend money on health insurance for their employees. And if there's some way to radically reduce the cost for them of what it costs to keep their employees healthy and productive, they're going to want it. And Congress is going to have to listen.
Yeah, I can't remember the stat now. I don't know if you can remember, but is healthcare cost 20% of employee cost now? It's some huge number.
I don't know the exact either, but it is like something like that. It's some incredible amount. Yeah.
Well, and obviously it goes up, and there's nothing really anybody can do about it, which is a whole other problem, right? It's just a crazy escalating. So we're 5 years away, and you think pressure will come from businesses, and sooner or later the technology is going to have to be adopted.
Yeah. And look, we have a, everybody uses the word healthcare crisis. That's what, if we've got a crisis and we can't pay for this stuff, we got to find another way.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. Well, and the flip side of this is that, sitting where you are, every VC in the Valley sees this, understands the pile of money and potential customers, and disruptive capabilities that are just waiting to be done, and they're all funding. They're funding companies in this space that they never would have touched 10 years ago.
Yeah, and it's interesting, particularly for software companies, healthcare, as you well know, has been a graveyard to many because it's such an entrenched, whether it's on the insurance side or the regulation side or both. It's so hard to move that angry elephant that wants it to be the way that it was, as opposed to the way that it's going to be. But you see VCs are really investing in this stuff and are pushing forward in spite of what might be big regulatory or big industry resistance.
Yeah, no, well, they are, and and it's also becoming the technology is finally there to make something of it. I mean, we finally have digital medical records. We finally have artificial intelligence. We finally have genomics tests that cost $200 rather than $20 million.
Isn't that incredible?
Right, and
has it been 20 years since
it was. Yeah, it was
98.
2001. It was
2001.
The Human Genome Project announced that it had sequenced the first human genome in 2001, which is really amazing. 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
And now you can swab the inside of your mouth and send it in for $200 and get most of your genome sequence.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Bill Gates. He said, "People often overestimate the impact of a new technology in the short term and underestimate it in the long term." Right. And I can remember feeling 15 minutes after the first genome was mapped, like, how come we're not having more cancer research breakthroughs? Like, what the fuck? Why aren't we getting anywhere with this genomic shit? Right?
Yeah. No, and that's all, and there's a whole bunch of genomic startups too, and they're just going to drive the costs through the floor until the point. I mean, what's going to happen is, we are a couple of years away from a point of time when every baby born is just going to get their genome sequenced, and you're going to have that for the rest of your life, and it's going to inform your healthcare for the rest of your life.
Wow. Is this, am I hearing a new book here, Mr. Maney? Is that,
Well, there are aspects of this that are in, the Mike Maples perspective you were just talking about is, Mike is a brilliant guy. His perspective is shared by some of the smartest people in Silicon Valley.
Well, he hangs out with a lot of the smartest people because he's one of them. So
he's one of them, and he helps inform many of them too.
And man, did he ever help us with Play Bigger, and so did Ann, his partner, right?
Exactly.
Who's also been on with us.
The new book is the new book does have it gets into the kind of territory you were just describing that Mike is also onto. Of you put these forces together, and you really are completely reshaping the economy. In the same way, and this is something we get into in the beginning of the book, is that this new book is that in the same way that in the early part of the 20th century, we had this amazing compilation of technologies that included electrification, the automobile, the airplane, all these things, the telephone, all happened pretty much at the same time and completely changed the economy then. And that's what we're going through now.
Amazing. I know you got to go, so I can't keep you. Anything else before we wrap, Mr. Maney?
Well, no, I just, as I've said to you 100 times, and I just want to make sure your listeners know that working, we're talking about losing times and winning times or whatever. The couple of years that I spent with you guys working on Play Bigger still, and may always be one of the best times of my professional life. We had a blast doing it. The fact that we had a blast doing it comes across in the way the book seems and sounds to people when they read it, and it made all the difference. And I'll always treasure that.
Well, thanks, Kev. I feel the same way. I tell people all the time, Play Bigger is the greatest collaboration of my working life. I'm having a blast now doing Legends and Losers. And so that's rapidly becoming right up there for me. But the reality is, if you say, hey, we're going to put 4 guys who are all fairly accomplished and fairly bullheaded and so forth together to see if something comes out. I mean, how many people thought it was ridiculous and didn't want to take us on and all that stuff?
Well, speaking of rejections, right? How many editors rejected us just based on the fact that there were 4 of us?
Absolutely. I mean, it was crazy. And I tell people all the time, Kev, you were and are the X factor. And, you know, you gave me such an incredible gift by bringing everything you did to the book. I mean, fucking A, dude. You know, I'm dyslexic. How does a dyslexic guy write a book? Never mind collaborate with 3 other guys. And you were the X factor, and you brought so much great thinking, not just writing. And man, did we ever have a good time?
We did. We did. We did. Well, Chris, I'm gonna have to leave it on that and get on this other.
Thank you, brother.
Unfortunately, but yeah, it was fun to do this.
Thanks, and hopefully you'll come back.
Okay, talk to you soon.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have it.
Kevin Maney.
Kevin Maney. So glad he could be with us, and I sure hope he comes back. And thank you for joining us today. Please subscribe to Legends and Losers on iTunes, Stitcher, and/or YouTube.
This podcast is not free. It costs you 2 minutes to give us a legendary review.
You can find us on Facebook.com/groups/legends
and losers.
On the Twitter machine.
On the Twitter machine at Legends Losers.
You can email us blackhole@legendsandlosers.com. And we would like to thank our friends at Equity Directory, the invite-only network of entrepreneurs and startup talent exchanging work for equity.
HarperCollins Instant Classic, Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets.
OneLifeFullyLived.org, dream, plan, and live your best life.
Category Design Agency, design and dominate your niche.
Our friends at Paradigm Sport in Santa Cruz, California, train like it matters.
Beer, proof that God loves us, says Ben Franklin.
World Wildlife Fund, animals are people too.
Tahoe Truckee Homes, we make Tahoe dreams real.
Marburn Academy in New Albany, Ohio, devoted to serving bright students with learning differences.
Wealth Can't Wait, the awesome new book from our friend David Osborne.
Montreal, Canada, we have the bagels.
Yeah, and quiche and whiskey.
Today's information is provided to you solely for informational purposes. This oddcast is produced in a factory containing nuts.
This oddcast is a sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and please share the shit out of it.
The producers of this oddcast may not have been paying attention. Teach entrepreneurship.
There is no such thing as a participation award.
Reaccommodate your alternate facts. Don't forget, Legends and Losers is on YouTube.
And you can't be a legend without being a loser.
My friends, that was about more than an hour of your life you'll never get back. And hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together.
So well.
Our deepest apologies to United CEO Oscar Munoz. Sorry, Oscar, we just ran out of time for you.
That's it. Be legendary,
Be
people.
legendary.